Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, Courageous Communications. We have a little bit of housekeeping to do today because last night my Facebook, both my personal and Courageous Communication, were both hacked and lost. So that's about 300 followers that we lost that we hope to get back to YouTube because people were watching via Facebook. So if you have time, please go to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, Courageous Communications. That way you won't miss an episode. If you would like to continue to follow me, you can go to Instagram at Just Be Courageous and follow there. And let's see. I'm just making sure I'm covering everything before we get started. But today we have some special guests and one person who I actually used to work with many moons ago, which is kind of exciting because it's just rekindling of a friendship and getting to revisit and see people as they move through their life. But this couple, Josh and Karri Beard, are kind of beating the odds in marriage right now. They are a marriage that is with a blended family, and they're going to share with us some of their trials and tribulations, but also some of the success story that is their marriage. They're going to give you some strategies. There's going to be things that shock you. There may be things that are something that you relate with. And so I just encourage you to listen in and take everything you can from what they have to share. So I'm going to welcome them in. All right. Hey, Josh. Hey, Karri.
Hey.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. I'm glad you're here. And I thank you for being here because I know it's not always fun to have everyone looking and watching you live. I still get nervous. I'm in a different place. Normally I'm at home, so I'm a little more comfortable at home right now. I am in West Texas, yay, but I'm at my mom's house and things are just kind of everywhere. They don't feel comfortable right now. So that's something that's happening on my end. Are you guys, go ahead, sorry.
Well, we're glad to be here.
Absolutely, good. Well, how about you guys just tell us a little bit about your family and then we'll kind of jump into some stats so that people understand what it is to be a blended family in America.
Okay.
I'm Josh Beard. This is my wife, Karri. We live in Midland, Texas. We are a blended family of five. We have three that came from my previous marriage. We have one from Karri's previous marriage. And we have one that is 10 years older than his closest sibling. That is ours.
Wow.
His
So
name is Cal.
would you say that, what's the age range there?
The oldest is 23. The youngest is 6.
Okay. Interesting. That's big age gap.
Yeah,
Okay,
we were
guys.
all about the co-parent sleeping.
Yeah.
Oh,
Co-sleep.
okay. All right. So just some stats about blended families. We're going to go ahead and hit it hard is that traditional families are no longer the norm. Actually, 65% of families are blended. Are you shocked by that?
I am. I come from a little bit of a Mayberry background. And those numbers do shock me. Even though I know they're real, I see those people every day. I work with them. We go to church with them.
Mm-hmm.
They're our neighbors. But yes, those numbers are shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Karri, this is your what marriage? And Josh, this is your what number marriage?
Third, the second was annulled within 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I had found out that he was still married.
Oh, wow.
So I moved back home on a Thursday, and then within 10 days, it was annulled.
Wow.
It was shocking.
I was going to say, I'm sure that revelation was upheaval of life there.
Yes, there was. I will tell you, there were major red flags I chose to completely ignore. going
Yes.
in, and I learned a valuable lesson with that. I would probably say it did do some damage in regard to Braden, because Braden was part of that, for at least 6 months within the home. But yeah, we moved back in with my parents and just started healing
Right.
as best as you could from that.
Yeah, sometimes I talk about red flags and, we see them, but then we just, wrap ourselves up in them instead of walk away from them. We just kind of, I don't know why that happens at times, but we just wrap ourselves in it even more. And then, of course, we can't see them anymore because we're so wrapped up into them.
Yes.
And so, yeah, absolutely. And Josh, this is what number of marriage for you?
This is my second marriage. I
Okay.
was married a little over 12 years the first go around, and this is number 2 for me. We're on
Okay.
10.
Okay. Very good. Well, congratulations. That's a huge feat in itself. 10 years is a big deal. So congratulations.
Thanks.
So I want everyone to know that the divorce rate in a second marriage is 65% to 73%. And so they're really beating some odds here by being in a third and a second marriage for 10 plus years. One thing that I found that was interesting was that blended families are said to have 3 times the amount of stress than first marriage couples. And so I'd like to get some feedback on that, just a unique perspective, maybe from both of you, as to what are some of the different stressors or some things, like, do you believe that that's true?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you find that are different stressors than maybe your first marriage or your second marriage, Karri?
Okay, the one that comes to my mind the most is probably in regard to in-laws. So one of the things when Josh and I started going to seeing our pastor a couple of years ago, he said sometimes what tends to happen is when you get a divorce and there's children involved and you have a set of grandparents who may step in to start helping with that nurturing role. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, I think there comes into play a level of, hey, you didn't make a good decision about this, and now we're second guessing how you're raising your kids. And we've had that come into play.
Okay.
That's been a stressor. Yes.
And I think that all people can probably relate with that in some way.
That into a traditional home, first marriage. But I think the dynamics are different, especially if a grandparent, helped, shuttle kids to school or whatever. And then there's a remarriage and they're no longer needed in specific roles anymore. The feeling
it feels like replaced,
to be wanted. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so having to let go of some of those roles.
Okay, absolutely. And shift them to someone else.
Yes.
Okay, that's very understandable. Josh, what is something that you noticed about stress? And is it 3 times more than the first marriage?
I definitely believe that it is 3 times more. I can't speak for all people or really for anyone else, but I can tell you, for me specifically, I don't like to lose. Failure is hard for me to overcome. Mm-hmm. And when I went through my divorce, to me, that was the ultimate failure. Mm-hmm. And it was earth-shattering to me on the inside. I couldn't even describe in words the brokenness. And I have honestly felt incredible pressure since then to not fail to that level ever again. I've struggled with failing as not only a husband but as a father, and in my situation, there were lots of people that would regularly tell me, what a great dad I was, and when you've failed at that level, it doesn't matter who thinks or who sees or who says what. You're the one that lives with that ultimate failure, and you're the one that looks at it in the mirror every morning. And it takes only one thing outside of self to overcome that level of failure. And so I have felt that pressure
Absolutely.
in my marriage.
Okay. I want to come back to that for sure at some point, how that kind of pressure for maybe both of you has affected your marriage, or unless you want to go ahead and do you want to tackle that now? Are you guys okay with that, or do you want me to wait for later?
Let's just carry on.
Okay. So, how has that amount of pressure affected the marriage? You guys as a unit?
Of not wanting to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's I think it's one of the drives.
Okay.
Because I don't like to fail. I do not like to lose at all.
Mm-hmm.
And when my ex-husband and I divorced, Russell, we were married for 10 years. I've shared with people, he was my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shattering. It shatters you.
Yeah.
And you don't know, you're in a fog and you can't think straight. And I've already been there, and I've been there twice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about Josh that just, I don't know. It just makes me just want to work harder and harder and harder every single day. We have gone through a lot. We have, and I don't know. I just look at him and I'm like, I'd die for you at this point. I don't know what else to do.
Yes.
And he has said the same.
Yeah.
He is a huge support system that I have. One of the private things that my dad shared with him when Josh asked my dad if he could marry me was what?
He just told me that he and Carrie's mother had always prayed for this situation to arise, and that he had been praying for me for years, since before he even knew me, because the role of husband was just going to be a little bit different for Karri. She and her dad were close. They had a very special relationship, and Don Norris left very, very big shoes to fill.
Yeah. Wow.
Karri's expectation is high,
Right.
as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And you already know that I'm a confessed failure on the highest level. So that was a little bit daunting when Karri's dad shared that with me.
Absolutely.
I can tell you, though, that she and I both, despite our failures, despite our sin, we're raised in homes where God was honored, and we knew what direction to go, what to seek, and how to make this work.
Gotcha. So there's a value system there that is strong and moving in the same direction, right? You kind of have some things working for you guys. You talked about the fact that you guys have been through a lot, and you can already see it. I mean, there's some raw emotions coming out already. So you guys have been through a lot. So tell us a little bit about what it's been like over the last 10 years and what marriage has been like, what family has been like, and kind of some of the things that you guys have been through.
You know, I'll give you a short litany. Pretty much within 2 to 3 months of our marriage is when custody hearings started to play. We were I try to think back specifically, but it's in the range of 6 to 8 within the first 5 years. Josh was the custodial parent. That meant I was the full-time stepmom, and the older 3 children had visitation with their mother. And as you know, that's rough. That's rough not only within a marriage, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It is financially too. Mm-hmm. And it's very costly to take anybody to court because it doesn't matter. The lawyers are getting paid regardless if they win or lose, and you're just billable hours. That's what you are. And there's lives at stake. And that's the way I always viewed it. It played an emotional toll on the kids. Mm-hmm. It did. You would ask them, is this what you're saying? Or, and they're getting asked from the other household too. Of course, they're going to say whatever needs to be said in that moment of time.
Right. And
our prayer for that time period, and I would get so worked up. I mean, it would just make me bonkers, that we were having to go through another court hearing and things like that. My tone, it just was never right, when this would come up. But, I've learned from that. So the emotional drain of that with us and with the kids, that was very, very hard. Mm-hmm. Because believe it or not, I mean, with each one of the 3 kids, there was a conversation with them that at some point you're going to have to decide what kind of relationship you want with, your mom. And I've never backed down from that, regardless of what the narrative is. That conversation did take place, within our home. In-laws, we had estrangement from my parents for a few years, and right now we are estranged from Josh's parents. And a lot of that goes back to, what I had said earlier. Mm-hmm. It's just boundaries.
Yes.
And boundaries, when they're crossed, and we're talking about, how we're raising our children, you don't want any other ideas and theologies bombarding that I would consider sound logic, but
yes,
some of it's viewed differently.
Right. We've left a church family.
We've left 2 church families.
There have been 2 dramatic career changes in the past 10 years. Ongoing lawsuits, dealing with the IRS, losing Karri's father, mm-hmm. and then dealing with a sexual assault with our children. We have lived real life. And I feel like any one of this laundry list is more than enough to do in a marriage.
Oh, yes. One of those.
Yeah, any one of them
Yeah,
just
for sure.
would be enough to just cash in and go your separate ways.
Mhm.
Um,
So how do you not do that as, as this family who already knows the deck stacked against you, right? As being a blended family coming into it with multiple marriages, how do you not do that? Because those are some big issues. Those are some big trials.
Communication, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. Um, Carrie can talk about levels of intimacy
Mhm.
far more articulately than I can, but
Okay.
we hear communication all the time.
Right.
The levels of intimacy shared between a married couple, that is communication. That's the
Absolutely.
type of communication that differentiates those that don't make it and those that do, I
Yeah.
believe. I think this is an extremely integral part of why some make it and others don't.
So what I'm hearing from you is that love is not enough sometimes. Love is just not enough.
No,
No.
love is absolutely not enough. It is
Okay.
not enough.
Well, Carrie, why don't you walk us through some of these levels of intimacy that Josh is talking about, that he, says that you can articulate beautifully for us?
I'll try my very best. Okay, I think emotionally, I think emotional intimacy is what really needs to be formed right at the very beginning of a relationship. Um, I think if you step out of alignment and immediately go into a sexual relationship, it definitely is not God honoring at that moment. I'm not saying God cannot step in and renew that relationship. But I think what happens is if a sexual aspect of the relationship gets involved initially, that's the wrong emotional intimacy that really needs to be nurtured at the very beginning. And so the emotional part is asking how I used to term it with the kids is you ask the hard questions. If you can't think of a hard question, come ask me because I'll give you one,
Absolutely.
And so we can go from there.
So what were some of the hard questions that you wanted your kids to ask?
Oh
And it
gosh.
may be some of the hard questions you were asking of Josh or vice versa.
Well, we would, Josh and I, we wanted those boyfriend girlfriend relationships to come over. We wanted to know what their conversations were about. I always wanted to be in the know. There's nothing wrong with that because,
It's a good place to be.
yeah, kids' brains are not even formed correctly until 25, 26.
Completely.
Not correctly. Completely.
Well, some
But,
debate.
but, and so, yeah, if we saw a red flag, we would bring it to their attention.
Mhm.
And a lot of parents will veer from that because that causes dissension.
Yes.
Well, I want to be honest with my kids.
Mhm.
I want to be upfront with them.
Did you get some kickback from that sometimes when you showed them some red flags or
Every time. Never failed. Every single time. Every
Agreed.
time. Mm-hmm.
But you were at that point, you were parenting, you're not friending, right? You're not there to be a friend at that point. You're there to parent and guide. And I think that that's an important aspect that sometimes can get kind of murky, right?
Yes.
Especially now. I don't know why the parenting aspect has become more of a friend. I want to be your friend. And I think that's important as well. But there is a role for parenting.
Yes, there's a time and place for that. And, I remember last summer there was a conversation, about one of the kids and who they were dating. And, when I asked the question, well, tell me a little bit about, this person, it was all superficial. And so I immediately went into
Red flag mode.
Red flag mode.
Mhm.
All these questions, and in the way, I slid into it was, tell me where, this person goes to church, and they're shying away from it all. And, that's a red flag to me. Not that church is, the ultimate goal here. My ultimate goal is, what is their relationship with Christ like? But if we're not even attending church, then I can only assume there's not a relationship with Christ at the moment. And we need to figure out why. What's the reason?
Mhm.
Because a relationship with Christ will heed a lot of behaviors. And so it definitely triggered a spiral with that one.
Okay.
What about the other levels of intimacy?
Yeah, so that was emotional, the emotional questions, correct?
Yes.
Spiritually.
I think spiritually comes into play, but your relationship with Christ, it definitely needs to be already in the works, ideally. I think before you really get invested, with somebody else. I think you need to be very solid in your values and your belief system. The way you interpret the Bible is a huge, not a pressure point, but
It's an obstacle.
yeah, it is an obstacle. And if you're not sound on your feet, then you're not able to have those hard conversations with someone that you're dating and really ask them. And if your relationship with Christ is strong, if you're walking through and somebody asks you a question, you shouldn't be defensive about it. You should be able to share instead of being defensive and, trying to pull off some sort of stunt.
Mhm.
And I think physically, we should be guarded in what we do physically until, we get married. It creates confusion and distortion if we're going down a path of just,
And deception.
Yes.
When you get the levels of intimacy out of order, you're inviting the seeds of dissension into your marriage. And if you're out there and you've gotten them out of order, it doesn't mean it's all helpless for you,
Mhm.
because all of this can be made right. And I think this discussion about the levels of intimacy and getting those levels of intimacy in the right order ultimately lead us to what I believe is the backbone, the spine of our marriage, and what should be the backbone of all marriages, and that's having a common ultimate goal. And Karri and I can look at each other, and she and I know exactly what it is I'm talking about when I say we have an ultimate goal.
Mhm.
Our ultimate goal is well done, faithful servant. And that's a goal that is even beyond our finite lives. That's a goal for eternity. And she knows that about me, and I know that about her. And she recognizes that God has entrusted her not only with our 5 kids, but me as well. And she's my helpmate. She's the one person in this world that's supposed to help me reach that ultimate goal of well done, good and faithful servant. And it's the same for me. God has put me in Karri's life to help her with that ultimate goal.
Mhm.
And she and I understand that we have to have intermediate goals in our finite life here that we can measure where we're going, and are we living a life of God's will that is going to end that well done, faithful servant.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys are older, you have more wisdom, you've kind of gotten those kind of intimacy levels, you understand them now. How do you talk to your kids or anyone else's kids about, because we're in a kind of completely sexualized culture. And we know that the stats are that by 8 years old, most children have been exposed to pornography.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that we can help send this message instead of the other? Because it's countercultural.
Well, I don't leave anything off the table. I pretty much will say it. Now with other children, even if they're teens, if they are still within under a roof line of their parents, I am very, very cautious of what I say, only because I am blunt. I am to the point. I have shared very openly with 4 of the kids. I think it's age appropriate. Right now, it's not Cal. And, I remember it was, we had just had Cal. And so it was like 2015, somewhere in there. And it was strange because Josh had the other 3 kids and I had Braden, and that really wasn't the norm because we were always together. And Braden asked to go to Rose's. And I was like, okay, on the way. And Braden he will ask very random questions, very random thoughts. It's just the way he is. And, he comes by it honestly. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, like, I want to know how Cal got in your belly. Mom, how did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And that question is beyond the created out of love and, Jesus was there. I mean, he wanted the scientific, he wanted to know. Right. And so in the drive-through Rose's line is where I started the conversation. And he would not get out of the car when we got home until it was ended.
One of the things we've been very open with all of our kids in talking about sexual purity, not so much just hammering home, man, sex is bad, but where sex belongs, why it was created, and where it is in God's created order. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the marriage relationship is to be an example of Christ's relationship with the church. And when we get these things out of order, just like the levels of intimacy and communication, when we get things out of order, that's where we mess things up. God has revealed himself in his word in the scripture, and he has revealed how we should relate to him, the creator as the created, and how we should relate to one another. And rather than hammering the kids with sex is bad, we have been very open with this is where it belongs. This is what God created it for, and where it should be in his order. Mm-hmm. And we've tied it right back to what is our ultimate goal. I mean, the big ultimate goal beyond our finite lives, and where is it in relationship to our intermediate goals? Like for our children, our first goal for each child is to send out a godly man or a godly woman into the world. And that's how we've approached those conversations, and we have approached them openly, and we have approached them often, and we have approach them scripturally always.
Mhm. So, with all of that being said, we know that there's some estrangements with some of the kids and some issues that have happened with sexual assault and different things. So, how do you factor that in and still, run towards your purpose?
Well, the purpose doesn't change for any of the kids.
Hmm.
Or us.
Yeah, or us. And I can definitely tell you there's going to be tears, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's happened with each of the kids.
Hmm.
I love every single kid
Hmm.
that's been in our home and in our arms, regardless of what has happened. And all sin, doesn't matter what it is, it breaks God, and it becomes distance between you and the Holy Spirit. One thing that I think is extremely hard for people to understand is that we seem to sort of categorize sin, and in God's eyes, there's not categories. It is all sin, and sin is separation. And as hard as it is, watching some of the sins play out, where they seem a little bit harsher than maybe, I stole some gum or whatever it is. If in the end, that's what breaks one of our kids to full repentance, I'm not going to stop it.
Amen.
If that means that there's failed relationships, and if that's what that child needs for full repentance, I'm not going to stop it. And Josh and I have chosen, we love all 5 kids.
Right.
But there's nobody that loves those kids more than Jesus himself, because he saw purpose in them and he created them. And I'm not going to stand in his way. And if I stood in his way, then he will never get the true glory that he sees and that he deserves. And I want God to get all the glory.
So about a year ago, I was, in my personal Bible study, I was in the book of Isaiah, and I know, every day what's going on in the world, from wars to, heinous acts against children, to homelessness, right being called wrong, and wrong being made right, and in the eyes of, there's all this stuff going on, and people are just convinced that, man, this world is getting worse and worse and worse. And while I'm reading, through the book of Isaiah, it dawned on me one day, the world's not getting worse. It's always been this way. We live in a fallen, sin-cursed world, and the history of mankind is not pretty. Not pretty at all. And then I get to Isaiah 26, chapter 26 and verse 3, and you see that there's hope and there's peace for those that trust in the Lord. And that verse, has just stuck with me. In the midst of all that was going on in the society that Isaiah was in, there was hope. And that hope is the same hope that we have today. Sickness, illness, trial, tribulation, there's peace to be found. And I promise, these statistics that shock people, I'm taken back when I see these statistics about, failed marriages, suicide, substance abuse, alcoholism. Those are shocking to me, but I understand. I truly do. Because if I didn't have the hope of Jesus Christ, that's where I would be too. There's no question in my mind. I don't know how people face the world every day outside of the hope of Jesus Christ.
Well, that's what your granddad said.
Absolutely.
Wow. I just think that's a really good place to kind of wrap up, because what that says is just that there is hope. And in your story, the whole time you said our story is just Jesus. And I think that is a great place to highlight the fact that that's it right there. There's a lot of things going on in the world, but for you guys, it's not just the world that you're preparing for.
Right.
You're preparing for eternity, and it looks like kind of, even though it may look a little bit chaotic here, you're looking for peace, for hope, for joy in eternity. Would that be correct?
Yes. And none of this, all 10 years, none of it never caught Christ by surprise.
Yeah.
Regardless of
the trial. I mean, he already knew, and he put us in place. He already knew how we would respond. He knows how he's going to fix it. And, in the meantime, we're trusting.
It's all for his glory and our ultimate good.
Mm-hmm. So what are some active strategies? We'll go one more place. What are some active strategies that people here in the world can use for their blended family? We've talked about the spiritual aspect of it. What are some active strategies that someone can incorporate in their lives to help ease the trials of the blended family?
I think one aspect that we really didn't think much on, it was brought to our attention, but it wasn't much thought, was the boundary aspect. Because if you think about it, in a traditional family situation, the way it's designed is that, your children will come after the marriage. So there's time for the two of you to get to know each other and to form, a marriage bond, and then your children come. And what's happened is we're trying to do all of that while raising kids. Mm-hmm. And I think shielding your family for a time period would be appropriate.
I agree.
Allow some time for the family to kind of marinate a little bit before we keep carrying on with all of these activities and things that they're really just distractions, to slow down some and allow some adjustments to set in before. Yeah, that would be one of the things.
Do you think that maybe what happens is in the distraction, then what happens is these things kind of fester for longer than anticipated, and then the issue is much bigger than what would have been had you dealt with it and allowed it to kind of naturally show up?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? I can always tell when you really agree, because you just crack up laughing. It's like you have something exactly in your brain that you're thinking of in that moment, an exact situation.
Yes.
I think it's also very important, for us, or I know for me, especially in my first failed marriage, I fell woefully short of being a godly father and husband. because whatever the issue was, whatever the problem was, my answer was always, okay, we got to just go to church. We just keep going to church. We'll just keep going to church. And I was not being the spiritual leader in my home. If you're relying on the Sunday school teacher to help your child be the primary source of them forming, biblical theology, you are falling short as a parent. And I think mom and dad both, whether it's a traditional family or a blended family, mom and dad both have to study the scripture with their children in the home. We have to model, this is how you pray. That can be as simple as praying at the table, praying before or after Bible study in the home. But just it's important to be involved and take your family to church. But if that is the extent of giving your kids a scriptural foundation, you'll be found derelict in your duty.
Okay.
You'll
Anything
create
else that you
spiritual
think?
intimacy between your spouse and your kids.
Yeah.
If you'll study the Bible corporately together in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very
And
good.
the one thing that I've noticed, especially about Cal, he has no reservation. I mean, everything is open for discussion. And I love that about him. Cal he just has a different perspective of Josh and I. And he's almost getting raised by two different people at this point.
Than the others.
Absolutely. I mean, Braden, I was 26 when I had Braden. Shortly after that, 3 years, our marriage ended in divorce. So he has kind of seen, this little roller coaster. And yeah, I hope, there's a level of grace that he gives me, as he gets a little bit older and recognizes, what mom and Josh went through. And, this is when they kind of had to respond in certain ways. Cal, on the other hand, is so protected and guarded. He doesn't even know to even ask the questions. It's, it's the weirdest thing that stuff is happening in the home and he doesn't know to ask. There's just a level of protection around him right now. And I really do think a lot of that is Christ himself. Yeah. Anything else? You agree? Disagree?
I do agree. Regardless of your situation, remember too, whether it's good, whether it's bad, regardless of what you're facing, it's ultimately for God's glory and for the believer's good. And sometimes you just have to tell yourself over and over and over because it seems that dark and bleak, but it's true. And you'll find it in God's scripture, his revelation of self to created man.
So in the midst of all this, there were some dark times, there's some difficult things. What are some of the good that you actually see in your life in the here and now that have come from some of these difficult situations? Kind of leave everyone with that kind of warm feeling.
I'll let you go first. It'll give me time to narrow it down.
Yeah. For me and to a degree, our whole family, some of us, like myself, you have to get to the very end of your rope and realize that you aren't good enough, you aren't smart enough, and you can't earn enough. You're in desperate need of a Savior, and you're in desperate need of grace and mercy. And in some of our roughest days, I'm so blessed to have laid my head on a pillow and realized that I didn't have to be good enough, that it was for God's glory. And if I had to fail, if I had to be broken, for God's glory to be seen, that it was for my ultimate good.
Yeah.
And that takes me right back to Isaiah 26. I can have peace in this life right now, but only through Jesus Christ, and without his grace and mercy, there is no hope.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see my kids struggle, when I see them broken, I still have that hope, and I realize that it might not be today, and it might not be next week, and it might not even be this decade, but ultimately they'll be able to look back and they will experience that same grace and mercy and have that hope solidified in their life because they've been on the mat, and they've experienced God's love, his grace, and his mercy the same way I had.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like to me that for you, you found freedom from the striving a bit, from the what I can do, what I have, what I'm capable of versus who I am.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was kind of the light in the dark for you, is that it kind of relieved you of all of that pressure, kind of the pressure that we talked about earlier, the pressure to be the husband, the pressure to make it, the pressure to maybe meet past that 10-year timeline, whatever it is that we can kind of set on ourselves sometimes.
It's still there,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be there tomorrow. But when you don't have anywhere else to turn, you'll turn to God. And, when those pressures arise tomorrow, I believe I'll be better equipped to handle them tomorrow than I was today, because of that renewing of our mind continually, that renewing of our mind in God's word and in prayer. And that's an encouragement to me, because I'll probably fail again tomorrow and the day after that at something.
Yeah.
But there's great joy and there's peace in knowing that I have hope, and it's the ultimate hope.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Karri, what about you?
Well, my answer is going to be a little bit more surface level than what
Okay.
Josh gave, but yes, what does keep us going, or I'll personalize it. What does keep me going every day? And I was really convicted by this in the fall. I was with a friend. I work with her. We were running to Rose's for lunch and running back, within that first 30 minutes. And I was sharing with her that somebody had said, how are you doing all of this? Like, how are you even getting up? Because my dad had just passed away, and, more issues were arising. And I looked at her and I said, you know what I said? I was like, inside, internally, I was thinking, why did you answer that way? And, I just looked at her and just very flippantly, I was just like, I don't even know. And you do get to that point. You're like, I don't even know how I'm functioning. I don't even know how I'm turning in these reports for, my principal. And I don't even know how I'm even talking to you right now. And I'm making, statements like actually like flow together. And I told my friend, I just said, I've been so convicted lately that I have to stop being flippant about it, because there's only one person that's getting me through every single day, and that's Jesus. That's it. And I really love my job. I haven't been in this position of really loving, my job for a long time. I bounce back and forth between accounting and teaching, and, like when I would get into back into accounting, I would like it for a short period, and then it would just weigh on me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kept bringing me back, into, the teaching aspect. And I've just made it a point that anytime when somebody questions me about, how are you getting through your day? Are you doing okay? That I just refer it back, to Christ. And I don't even know if I've even answered that correctly, but who knows? We'll watch this and go, you were totally off the wrong track.
You're doing great.
But I will say that it's interesting because, even when we would, like the big hard days that we can probably count on two hands, okay? Josh and I, for some reason, it's never real tense between us on those days.
Mm-hmm.
It's odd because when things like that get tense, or there's a death or something like that, typically with me on the inside, I want to recoil, just pull back all together and kind of sit and think about some things. But, I've changed over the years with Josh. Instead of sort of, pulling back inside, I just start talking. The tension level in our house is probably at the lowest, literally, on, some of the worst days that we've had. It's sort of when, I don't know how you would word it.
I can openly share with Karri, and I promise she can openly share with me the things that we think in the recesses of our mind that never come out, that no one ever hears, sees. I can share those things with her, and she can share those things with me. That she's exactly right. Some of our hardest days or hardest nights, the strength of our relationship to one another has been on full display.
Mm-hmm.
And I would attribute that to grace. I don't deserve that level of connection with any other human being in the world, but God's given it to me in Karri, and I think she could say the same for me as well. For sure, the hardest days have put the strength of our relationship at the forefront of both our hearts and minds.
Absolutely. So with 10 years kind of going into the rear view, what does the next 10 years look like for you in your hopes and your dreams?
Well,
that might not be reality, but in your hopes and your dreams.
Well, just being funny. I hope that in the next 10 years that Josh and I are able to travel a little bit more than what we've been able to do. There's just something about, getting away, just the two of you. The last time we got away, just the two of us,
Been a while.
was 2019. And my dad stepped in and he watched the kids for us for one night. I was going through a time period where I was extremely anxious. My anxiety was extremely high. I did not want to leave the kids at all. And Josh just sort of forced a hand to, get away for the night, to try out one night.
Mm-hmm.
And we've made it a priority. We do go on weekly dates. We do go out to eat on Wednesday and then probably a Friday or a Saturday. That's a lot easier now with Braden being older and Cal a little bit more self-sufficient for himself. Beforehand, we had, one of the girls or something. But it's nice now, there's time that we make for each other. I think that's been huge in our marriage because he gets so busy. There's so much conversation happening in the day with both of our jobs that when we get home, we've exhausted all the words.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to be more quiet at home. But on Wednesdays, for sure Wednesdays, or Friday or Saturday, that's typically when we'll kind of catch each other up, kind of what's happening at work or within a relationship that we have, with one of our coworkers or whatever. To me, that's important. That's part of the connectivity, that we have. I don't know. We have a couch in our bedroom, and so we kind of sit there at times and talk. Even after work, there's been some times, that we do that. But mainly when we come home, it's a level of decompression that we both need. Mm-hmm. What would you say?
The next 10 years, I hope that we see healing and restoration in a big way, but more than the desire for that healing and restoration. It's my hope that God is glorified in everything that's happened, everything that's going on, and everything that's going to happen. And I believe the next 10 years, God will use our experience to help other people, people that don't have hope,
right?
Find true and ultimate hope that it's not just good for today, but eternity.
Mm-hmm. Well, you heard me ask, are you guys leading a life group in this situation? Are you a blended family life group? So I'm sure that there is something on the horizon, because things like that don't just come out of people's mouths. Sometimes they're there for a purpose and for a reason. And maybe it's to confirm something that maybe it is that has been on your mind or someone else has said, or maybe it was to plant a seed in your mind. So anyways, take that for what it's worth, right?
But we have to yes, but I just think we need to wait for, God's time. I think there's some other moving pieces that need to come into play for that to be truly reflective of the timing of Christ, for us to do that. And, being married to Josh is, it really is wonderful. There have been, we've talked about the hard times, but I can tell you, I mean, he will say something that will make you belly laugh, and, vice versa. I'm pretty sarcastic, and, we just, I don't know, it just works the way we both think. And, he understands me. I love that about him. And, I've really enjoyed getting to know him, over the last 10 years. There's things about, his childhood and, just his thoughts, when he was a child that he'll share. And, I just don't know if very many people talk about those things in their marriage. They kind of leave them by the wayside as if it's not significant. Because I really don't remember my first marriage as ever talking about things like that before.
Do
It
you
was
think it's
always
because
about,
you guys knew each other for so long and so intimately as friends before that it's kind of like it felt like you didn't have to do that?
well, no, it was a fast dating. He thought my dad was using me to get him into the singles ministry at church. And, and that wasn't true. We were communicating the summer of 2012 via email because I was too bashful to talk to him on the phone or even to text him. And I had never had anybody that kind of made me, get nervous on my feet. And I just knew he was different. And I just wasn't quite sure of everything. And I remember his family used to sit behind mine in the pew. And if I saw him sitting there, next to his mom, I would run to my dad's office. And I'm like 30 years old, running to my dad's office, and I would just sit in there and wait for the church service to end. And I can't remember all in detail, but he finally told me in one of the emails back and forth, he said, well, here's my number, just give me a call. And so we texted, and we would text to like 3, 4 in the morning. And then he'd get up at 5, to go to work and get his kids ready for school. So we decided real fast that maybe we needed to go on our first date. And we did. And I mean, I was hooked from the get-go with him. I don't know. I just loved everything about him. And every time he talked, I just sort of drool over his words, but it didn't matter. And he was very open at the very beginning of kind of where he was financially and, with his children. And, I wasn't oblivious to any of it, but I just chose from the get-go that this is who I wanted to walk with for the rest of my life. And
When somebody trusts you like that, somebody that's been broken, I guess, the way I was, it's nothing short of God's grace. Karri was exactly what I needed and what God provided to heal my life.
Yeah. Wow.
so he asked me to marry him on Cinco de Mayo, 'cause I love you like tacos. And he just asked if we could do it within 6 to 7 weeks. And I was like, okay. So we did. And we left our rehearsal. We had left our reception within like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We were ready. We were done, and I don't know. I mean, I've enjoyed, it's weird to say, that you've enjoyed walking through the hard days. I mean, there's been some hard days, and I'm thankful that it's him, because if it was anybody else, we wouldn't be here.
Mhm. Yeah, very good. Guys, I'm just so grateful for you sharing your story with us. I know that it was a difficult story to share, and I know there were parts of it that we didn't get to take deep dives into just for a couple of different reasons. But I just want to tell you thank you so much. Um, I I'm pretty sure that you're open to hearing from people if they need some further guidance or assistance with their blended family, or just some
Mhm.
struggles or situations that they're going through. So, of course, people can get in contact with me, and then we can get you connected with Josh and Karri. So, I just appreciate you guys and taking the time. I know we're a little over, but I just wanted to hear that story. And so thank you guys for coming on. I'm going to boot you out, but we'll visit right after we finish. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Uh-huh. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.